All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Look, if you've spent literally any time online looking into self-improvement, you've definitely seen a very specific, perfectly polished narrative. But today, we're going to completely deconstruct that deeply romanticized lie of the glow-up. We are going to uncover the stark, frankly exhausting reality of what true self-transformation actually looks like. Think of this as an autopsy of the ego. We're getting right into the dark side of healing. You know exactly the montage I'm talking about, right? Society treats healing like this ultra-positive movie sequence. It's all 5 a.m. wake-ups, drinking aesthetically pleasing green juice, and then magically emerging as this perfect, beautiful butterfly. But let's look at the stark contrast here. If you are actually going through a deep psychological transformation right now, you know the unspoken reality. The dark truth is that it absolutely does not feel like a beautiful glow-up. It's brutal, it's exhausting, and honestly, it feels a whole lot more like you're just losing your mind. So, this brings us to a really fundamental question. What if finding peace isn't about adding new positive habits to your daily routine at all? What if true transformation is actually a brutal process of destroying literally everything you used to be? That's what we're looking at today, diving directly into the dark psychology of self-transformation to figure out why healing actually feels exactly like grief. Which brings us to part 1, grieving your old self. To really wrap our heads around why changing your life is so incredibly painful, we have to define exactly who you used to be. For years, you probably operated as what we'll call the survivor. It's a very specific set of survival skills. You know the drill. You learn to people-please just to stay safe. You learn to stay quiet to avoid any conflict. You basically learn to shrink yourself down to make everyone else around you comfortable. And hey, that version of you, the survivor, did exactly what it needed to do to keep you alive during your darkest days. But here's the catch. You aren't in danger anymore. And the absolutely hardest part of transformation is realizing that the version of you that survived the trauma cannot be the same version of you that gets to experience the peace. That survivor version literally has to die. I want you to consider the heavy, invisible weight of this quote right here. You aren't oppressed. You are simply mourning the death of your old self. Wow. That heavy exhaustion you're feeling, it isn't necessarily a failure on your part, and it might not even be clinical depression. It's a profound, very literal grieving process. You are basically attending a funeral for the person you had to be. And that brings us to part 2, surviving the isolation phase. Now, what's really fascinating here is how the death of that survivor triggers a terrifying new symptom, total isolation. As you begin to change, you're going to become incredibly lonely. Why? Well, just look at these triggers. When you finally stop abandoning yourself just to make others happy, when you start setting strict boundaries, and when you absolutely refuse to tolerate disrespect anymore, the people around you are going to get incredibly angry. They'll accuse you of changing, and for sure, they'll call you selfish. But let's unpack the psychological reality of that anger for a second. Are they mourning you, or are they mourning control? The brutal truth is, they aren't missing your true essence. They aren't missing your soul. They're simply mourning the compliant, people-pleasing version of you that they could easily manipulate and control. Realizing this is exactly how you handle the isolation phase. Because honestly, transformation requires this total isolation. You just can't tolerate the superficial connections that used to distract you from your pain anymore. You kind of have to step into that void completely alone. Let's move into part 3, the brain's sabotage machine. This right here is widely considered the absolute most dangerous phase of transformation. When you finally do reach a healthy, stable environment, your brain experiences intense cognitive dissonance. Your nervous system literally starts to panic. Why on earth would it do that? Because unfamiliar peace feels like a threat. Your brain has literally no historical experience with it, so instead of relaxing, it sounds a massive alarm bell. The contrast between these two environments is honestly mind-blowing when you lay it out like this. In familiar chaos, your brain actually feels safe because it recognizes the toxic pattern. It knows the rules of the chaotic game. But put it in an environment of unfamiliar peace, and the brain's immediate reaction is panic and threat assessment, purely because it has no past experience with stability to draw from. It's wild to think about, but the brain literally prefers a toxic, chaotic environment over a peaceful one, just because of pattern recognition. And this perfectly explains the sabotage phase. I mean, have you ever asked yourself why you suddenly feel this overwhelming, ridiculous urge to text a toxic ex or pick a fight with your current partner right when things are going perfectly well? Like, Why do you try to blow things up when your life is actually great? Well, here is your answer. You aren't broken. Actually, scratch that. It's more like your brain is just a hyper-vigilant survival machine, and right now it's addicted to familiar chaos. It is practically begging you to return to those old toxic patterns, because to your nervous system, familiar pain feels so much safer than unfamiliar peace. Recognizing this addiction is absolutely crucial. It's the only way to stop the self-sabotage right in its tracks. Which brings us to our final section, Part 4, Embracing the Peaceful Void. Look, if you're watching this explainer right now and you're sitting smack in the middle of your transformation, feeling totally exhausted, isolated, and maybe unsure of who you even are anymore, I really need you to recognize this space. You are not going backward. You are not failing. You are simply sitting in what we call the void. It's that dark, quiet, and terrifying space between the person you used to be and the person you're becoming. And honestly, it's exactly where you need to be. To actually survive this space, you've got to follow these exact steps to embrace the peace. Number 1, let the old structures burn. Do not try to salvage relationships or habits that were built entirely on your trauma. Number 2, do not rush the rebuild. Society wants you to have that quick, snappy montage, but real healing takes time. Just sit in the quiet. And number 3, protect your peace ruthlessly. Seriously, do not let the familiar chaos back in just because it feels comfortable. To wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a provocative thought, something to chew on as you quietly move forward. Take a look at your own journey and ask yourself, what is the absolute hardest habit or the hardest person that you had to bravely walk away from in order to finally claim your peace? Keep that answer close to you as you navigate your void. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.